Welcome to our 38th Salon of the Maternal Gift Economy Breaking Through. The series is hosted by Genevieve Vaughan and the International Feminists for the Gift Economy. I am Letecia Layson, your moderator. Today, we're happy to have Genevieve Vaughan, Sherri Mitchell, Tracy Gary, and if Angela Miles makes it today, we hope that she might just enter into the room and she'll be one of our presenters as well. We had the great opportunity from the International Feminist for the Gift Economy to travel to the global Matriarch gathering that Sherri Mitchell held on her land. So we are so happy to bring to you some personal reports and experiences, and to have Sherri tell us a little bit about her experience. So Sherri, with all that was said and done, I know there were quite a few women who came, and they came representing many different countries. Can you just tell us a little bit about how you decided to come together with that, and who these people were, and what your experience was like there?
Yes, thank you. And I just want to take a moment to introduce myself in my language. Andali wisi wana hamu Kwasset na jiobana wabskewi. Indel nobama kawasus no ban wabskewi nagakakagos no tibayak. I just want to acknowledge my family. My name in my language, Weh'na Kwasset. My family is Bear Clan from the Penobscot Nation and Crow Clan from the Passamaquoddy tribe at Tabike. So the Global Matriarchs Gathering was, actually had a dream that we were doing this a couple of years ago. And I had talked to a friend of mine about it, a friend of mine that many of you know, Mika Mahan. And saw women from many different places coming together here to talk about what is the role of the matriarch in the unfolding of our future, and how do we begin to really fully step into our place as not only, the creators and the sustainers and the nourishers of life, but also kind of as the guardians of the future. How do we step into that role to ensure the continuity of life moving forward? And so that was the vision. And the barn where we gathered was under construction up until 3 days before people arrived. And so things kept getting pushed back, and it ended up being a little bit smaller than I thought it was going to be. We ended up having 120 women. There were women there from 8 or 9 different countries. And it ended up becoming what it was meant to be, right? We all have our ideas of what it's going to be at the beginning, but I've learned over the time of having big gatherings that you plan up to a point, and then you surrender to whatever is going to be created with that collective energy. And I think that what we created with that collective energy, and just the holding of that space and honoring the gifts that everyone brought to that space, and kind of being welcoming in an open-hearted way to bring everybody in together. It's the first time that many women had been together since COVID. And so I wanted to really recognize that. And one of the things that we did in preparation for this was we had ceremony here on the land many times before the women came, to make sure that the space felt like an open, welcoming space for them to come. And we wanted to talk about, I had my friend Catherine Wilkinson, Dr. Catherine Wilkinson, who joined us, who brought in some time for reflection and contemplation of the role we have in visioning a path forward. And she is one of the co-editors of the All We Can Save book, which is a compilation of writings from 60 different women within the climate movement. I have a piece in there, a chapter in there. You know, looking at all we can save. So this is really what we're thinking about, you know, what can we save by bringing ourselves back to a place of balanced, just, you know, equitable, harmonious, loving, caring ways of being in relationship with one another and with the rest of life. And so that was the contemplation. It was a very short period of time for us to be together for that. But also it was, you know, it was a soft opening. So it was the very first event that had been hosted in the barn. And we have hopes that next year's gathering will be bigger. We have hopes that we will actually have some bathrooms for people that are not porta potties next year, perhaps, if we can do a good job fundraising over the winter. We learned a lot during that gathering. I think together, collectively, we learned a lot. And for me, I mean, one of the things that, whether it's, you know, ceremony or whatever that we open up to the public, one of the things that I've learned is that it's really hard for non-Indigenous people to come into an Indigenous space without an entitled expectation of taking. And that's something we've had to talk about every single time we've had a gathering, that there's a difference between receiving and taking. And many people know how to take something, but they have a very hard time receiving. And so we really had to go into that, you know, what is the difference in that space between receiving and taking, and trying to do that in a way that was gentle enough for it to actually come in, for people to take that in. Because, you know, when we come at something too hard, people just go like this and then they don't take it in, right? But if we can lean in a little bit more gently, then maybe they'll hear it. Maybe they'll start to think about it, and they'll start to, you know, understand. And I think that that's part of the challenge with the gift, is getting people away from that mindset of taking and exchange, and quite honestly, moving away from a sense of entitlement to a sense of obligation and responsibility towards the care of one another. It's this whole subtle shift that needs to take place. And I was just absolutely delighted that you all could join. It meant a lot to me to have you there. It meant a lot that you traveled here, Jen, and that you shared some of your wisdom from our space. And, you know, I think that there are things for all of us to learn in this experience. And there's a lot that I've been thinking about, and we're going to be having, for those who are participants of the registrants of the gathering, we're going to be having an online session coming up sometime in the next few weeks that we didn't get to during the gathering, that I'm trying to make space for right now. You know, just a 2-hour Zoom where we can be together to talk about, you know, how we begin building communities of care in a real way. And so when everyone left and it was all done, you know, another thing that we realized we needed was an industrial kitchen, because we had cooked all of the food out of my kitchen, which is not sufficient to feed 120 people plus staff. And it took about a week to put the kitchen back together, but we all survived. And my heart was just full. I mean, I just felt filled up after having been in that space with all of those amazing women, and the energy that they brought, the realization that everybody brings something with them to the table. And that when we can stop being in competition with one another and start looking at one another from a place of honor and reverence and gratitude, that there's so much more that we're able to share with one another. But that also opens us to receiving, opens us to be able to really have some deep appreciation for what people are bringing to the table. Even people who are challenging bring something to the table that's important for the entire group, right? Like we all, there's some people that have been teaching me how do I show up in a way that's more patient? How do I, show up in a way that's not wrought with frustration? And try to be who I most want to be in the world, which is somebody who comes with a presence of love to what I do. And so I think that even the things that were a little bit more difficult in the process felt really rewarding and like a gift. And so it's something that I'm still digesting. We're still talking about here. And we're thinking about how we do it better next time. We have to get a whole new stairway built going in with an accessibility ramp. We have to have the ground in front of the barn flattened out so that people who do have accessibility issues are not having an uneven surface to be walking on. We can drive them right up to a comfortable flat surface. And so, all of those things we're working on and carrying with us the essence of the gifts that we're carrying. And then there's an event that we have that's not an advertised event, it's an invitation only event. And it's the last event of the year for us here. And we honor young mothers and we bring them in and we find ways to help support them through the holiday season, which is often very stressful for young mothers, especially young mothers who are parenting on their own. So, carrying the beauty and the gifts that we received from the women's gathering into this final event, because the men came together after the women's gathering here, which was also really powerful. Carrying all of that energy into this final gathering where we try to uplift and support and provide resources for these young moms who are raising our next generation and giving them inspiration and proper credit for the hard work that they're doing. It's very, very difficult right now to be a single parent in the world, especially if you don't have a lot of resources. And to acknowledge that even when I was coming up as a young mother, a single mother, it was easier than it is now for some of these young people because of the incredible jump in housing costs and some of the other inequity economically that, as part of this exchange economy, that it's just designed to keep people into this constant state of servitude where they never really can catch their breath. And so we want to really make sure that we're supporting these young women during a time that's very difficult because of the way that capitalism has kind of bastardized our systems and our societies, and help them to focus more on the joy of their families and sharing meals and doing the simple things during this time, making crafts with their children, things like that. So yeah, so I think that's me for now, and we can move next to Jen to hear your reflections.
Well, thank you so much, Sherri. What a wonderful gathering that was. And it was just really important that you did it and are continuing to do these gatherings. When I had not been to Maine, maybe ever in my life, and I was so impressed by the nature there. It's just so beautiful. Those huge trees were amazing. And to come to your land where you keep it so beautifully and and you can tell that it is a sacred place, because you have reclaimed it for your people, your tribe. And those beautiful trees there, just presences that I really wanted to relate to as much as I could. But of course, I'm a city person basically, and I don't have as much of a common language with the trees as I would like to have. But anyway, it was great to see and be near all of those beautiful presences. And it was wonderful to be in the space of the barn, which is a very open space, it's like an open rib cage, an open heart. It's a beautiful place to be, and it has really good energy, as they say, even though I know it wasn't finished, but it was really wonderful as it was. And I really thought the women who were there were all good people and all well-intentioned and women of a common purpose, let's say. And so that was exciting to be there. And I really do appreciate also that, in a way, I feel that you and I are in a sort of parallel position, that you have opened up for me. And that is that I can talk about the gift economy with you and the people that you gather, and you are the indigenous person that knows it from her ancestry. And I know it from just having had a revelation many years ago and trying to stick to that. And so although our perspectives, we come from different places, it is really, I really do appreciate it so much. And well, and I also appreciate that you invited me and asked me to speak about the gift economy as I see it, because I come from, the gift economy with that I have tried to elaborate within, let's say the ruling class, the white ruling class of the settler population. And I got my political education and my feminist education in Italy. And so in a way, I went to a country that had not become a settler of the United States or the Americas or Turtle Island. And so I just feel I'm very lucky, because I happened on this, what I think of as this truth, and that we can share this in some ways, and I can call on you to say it the way you see it, and that in a way validates what I'm trying to say and trying to promote. And so I really appreciate that. A part of the idea of the gift economy is also the criticism of the exchange economy. And I was interested in what you were saying before about the taking instead of receiving, and how that works, because we who are infused with exchange hardly know how to receive, and how we also have problems in giving. And so if you don't know how to receive, then it's hard to know how to give because you don't know how the other person is going to receive what you give. And so these are many, we have so many problems with what do you call it? Mores, with what we do every day in our interactions that are based on exchange instead of on gifting. And we don't realize that we even have that problem. And but I think that we can see it when it does happen. And so always it's good to point it out, and how, you know, if you can't receive, you can't actually trust that the other person is trying to give to you. And so we live in a world that seems hostile because we don't enter into the gift paradigm, and we're always on the side of those that are exploiting it. But we have to figure this out and change it. Otherwise, you know, we can see now what the results of patriarchal capitalism are on the planet. And so we have to figure it out and change, really change. Everybody can. And I've been, you know, practicing for a long time, trying to see the gift where it exists and bring it out. And we can all do that. That's one of the first things long ago that I thought of about that was when somebody says, "How are you?" They're asking, "What are your needs?" And so that is like, if gifting is giving to needs, then we're also initiating a gift interaction. And of course, people say, "Oh, I'm fine," and there's no gift given. Or there is a sort of a gift given to the other person because she says, "Oh, well, I don't need anything." But there are lots of hidden gift interactions all the time going on, just as there is lots of gift giving between nature and us all the time. Every breath we take, and every breath we give out, it's a gift cycle. So we just really don't see it. And I think what has happened is that with the market and with patriarchy and with money, we got in Europe and the other countries that were doing that kind of economy and patriarchy, we got really sick. It is an illness, and a social illness, and we have spread that everywhere we've gone. And we need to roll that back and go to the gift economy within ourselves so that we can both save the planet, live on Mother Earth in a good way, and live with each other and honor each other and everything that has happened in our ancestry to bring us here and bring us through. We can do it, I know. So thank you so much. Thank you, Sherri, for having the gathering, and it was a beautiful thing. Thank you.
Yes. Thank you, Jen, for those words. Sherri, are you still there? She might have stepped away for a minute.
I'm here.
Did you want to just, Jen had brought up, you know, again, about the taking and the receiving. Would you want to just clarify a little more about that? So, because I thought that was really a good point that Jen had brought up. And just to note, we are in a different flow in this particular salon, more akin to the way that we were actually in the gathering.
Well, I think that, you know, when there's an expectation that people, what we were really talking about is really about a colonial mindset. that is tied to the colonial capitalist system. And what happened here was that there were a few people who found things here on the land and just decided that they were going to take them. They felt like they had some right to come in here and take whatever they wanted, as though an invitation to enter meant an invitation to take. And so when we're sharing things that are of the heart, you know, of the mind, of the spirit with others, there's an opportunity there to receive something that's going to deepen your being. And when there's no space for that opening and that deepening of that receiving, then what ends up happening is it leads to some type of material grasping. And I think that that's really tied to the exchange economy, is that it keeps us operating in a transactional manner that allows us to just skim along the surface of grasping for something that's material, whether it's something that's of value or not is dependent on the individual, but there is some materiality to it. It's something tangible, right? That they can grab onto. And the gifts of the spirit, the gifts of the mind, the gifts of the heart that are being shared, if there's no place for them to go, that often leads to some type of grasping in that manner. And I think that what I was trying to communicate to people was that, you know, all of our prophecies speak of a time when we're going to come together and we're going to begin operating in a way where we're going to be sharing things from an Indigenous perspective, that have things that we have not been willing to share with others before. And we're sharing those things so that people can receive them, and it can deepen them. It can open them. It can inform their being. It can inform their way of knowing and being in relationship with the rest of life. And that type of relationship is unusual for people when their relationships are based on transactional exchange types of engagements, which is what we have come to expect under the exchange economy and under capitalism. And so what we're really trying to introduce is a different kind of relationship. One that allows us to live in a state of reciprocal sharing rather than reciprocity, that allows us to grow and deepen our beings by our connectedness. And sometimes that's in the form of food, right? You're gifting food. Sometimes that's in the form of making sure that your bodily needs are met, right? And sometimes that comes in the form of making sure that your spiritual and emotional needs are met, that your mind is stimulated, right? And that your heart is fired up about what it is that's being offered to you. And so there's a lot in there that we could spend a whole salon talking about, I believe. But I think that, you know, thinking about one of the things that Catherine said is that if you're not willing to go deep and to receive things and have them come deeply into you, then, you know, not only are your thoughts going to remain on the surface, but your actions are going to remain on the surface, and they're not going to go deep enough to be able to create any lasting change. And so it's really kind of in that same vein that, you know, when we receive something, we take it into ourselves in a way that's different than just taking it in our hand. And so that's the distinction, I guess, that I was trying to make.
Thanks, Sherri. I think that really clarifies some of the linking that happens with the gift economy and the personal transition that needs to take place as we each find our way as a return to what is natural, what is our nature as humans to the very beginning. So thank you for that. I want to just welcome Angela to the group, and we're glad that you came. We will have Tracy next to share her experiences and insights into where she is. Angela, are you?
I just want to say I'm glad to be here. I'm really here in spirit, and I hope I can hear previous remarks. I have to go off to the rehab center very soon, and I'm just I'm here, and I'm pleased to be here, and I'm preparing and pulling things that are needed together. So,
Okay, Tracy, it's all yours.
You're all beautiful.
Thank you. And I just want to say, for all of you who are listening today and are here with us today, all of our bios are on the website, maternalgifteconomymovement.org, since I'm not officially reading our bios out loud. But Tracy, welcome.
Thank you. I'm I was very honored to get to go to the gathering. And just by way of a little bit of background, I've known Jen probably over 40 years, maybe 35 years, as a feminist and as a donor and as an initiator of a lot of really creative, amazing projects. And I'm 71, she's a little older than I am. So every once in a while I reach out to her as a mentor. And this summer I did so when I was leaving the United States to go on vacation, which I rarely take time to do. But when I do, I thought, oh, I'm going to need to speak Italian and French the whole time I'm in Europe because I'm embarrassed to be an American. And, that was just a reality. And I thought I need to call Jen because the patriarchy and capitalism are taking us off the cliff. And I know that her work has been so steeped in this. And I did know about the maternal gift economy, of course, but also about the salons. I had not realized that there have been so many of them. I think we're the 38th. So I'm very, I probably only listened to 10 of them myself or been on maybe 2 or 3. So I just want to say to go actually, Sherri, to your land. And when I first saw the invitation, I was very moved because I thought, it is what we need to feel that we belong and that there's a movement really happening is the reflection of some of the same language, culture, and values and belief. And even as matriarchal culture in indigenous communities, of which, I know there are 570 some odd tribes plus another 200 that are unrecognized by the government. I have absolutely no idea how many of those have been indigenous matriarchal led. But I wanted to learn more. And I am not an academic. I'm a very practical person who tries to bring donors, tries to learn myself, and then through my passion and my awakenings, bring other donors to considering new things to fund. And as we know, the indigenous and BIPOC communities and women generally are grossly underfunded. And, this is approaching my 50th year of doing this. So I go to see projects all the time and try to be a good communicator. So when I arrived, I had had quite a journey there. I'd had, some planes that were canceled, and, I arrived 5 minutes before the start of things, having taken probably 20 hours to get there from California. And what I noticed in my own energy was that I was so excited to be for 3 days in a learning community, and knowing nothing other than what I had read. I had not had a chance to read Sacred Instructions yet. I do, for those of you who are on the call but may not know Sherri's work. This is one of Sherri's books anyway. It's a really great book, and we'll put it hopefully in the chat. Sacred Instructions has a lot of deep wisdom, and I had read maybe 20 pages of it before coming to the conference, but to the gathering. I think we should call it a gathering. So the thing that really moved me was just as you described, Sherri, your intentionality of creating. I've helped put on hundreds of events, so I know both being in the river of life and the flow and the excitement and the adrenaline that happens when one knows one is preparing for something bigger than ourselves to bring, to showcase the beautiful work that you'd been able to do, including raising money for this. Is it 210 acres? I've forgotten how many. We didn't really say how many acres it is, but the land you bought only months before, had to repurchase basically because it was, I think it was owned by Indigenous people at some point. Sherri, was it 210 acres? 200.
It's right around 215.
Yeah, so 215. So, just a stunning piece of land that was near Bangor, Maine. And, Jen and the group of us that are on this call now were staying in a VRBO. And, there were moments when I thought, oh, I wish I was in a teepee on the land because it's just such, the land feeds us so much. But it was good for us to also have some space. But we were greeted immediately with grace. The invisible men, as they were called, because this is a matriarchal gathering and culture, met us with so much positivity. And it just seemed from the moment one arrived, it seemed that our needs were not only to be taken care of, we were being gifted by open-heartedness. And it made us all want to be open-hearted with each other. And there was, in fact, just as you intended to create, Sherri, both a structure and an outline of what was to happen, which, for those of us who are from that other world living in our heads and need that security sometime of what really are we going to be experiencing, to let go of that and to actually feel within minutes that you were a great leader that I could surrender to. Great is not really the right word. You're a respected human being with vast interpersonal experience that I knew that I would learn from. And so there was a sense of belonging right away. And because you gave the spaciousness for us to create the relationships, and what did that really mean? And then when we arrived, things did not start right away. We were given time to get tea and coffee. We were nurtured every minute we were there in a very subtle, non-invasive way. There was just, food and nurturance and, lots and lots of amazing people that we heard from, and a structure that really worked. Meanwhile, the land and the barn that we were in was just so moving because I realized, oh, this is not just a community experiment. This is a woman who has a vision, who's connected to Jen before, who makes the connections between the matriarchal culture and ways, and a deep concern that we share that the patriarchy as it is, I'm sure within Native communities, because I work with several other Native communities, that sometimes the men and sometimes the women are imploding under the stress and the we could go into detail, but there's just immense stress. And of course, with COVID, so many Indigenous people have lost not 2 or 3 people, but 20 and 30 people that they know. And the grief is on top of a deep, deep grief that exists. So I felt at home, which I don't always. And that was really, it's, I'm endlessly working on my white-skinned arrogance, but it is true that when you're sort of a person who tries to look at things and take notes, and that sometimes you miss the interpersonal connections. And I decided that I really needed in the breaks to put down everything and really see who was at the conference and also see who was part of your community. And it was a really beautiful, very gentle, as you said, way of both seeing who you were, a bit of exhaustion on your part, of course, because it was like, oh my God, now they're all here, or, who is meant to be here is here. And I found you not only welcoming and receptive to, the interruptions or sometimes the contributions that people wanted to make, but you also have this just beautiful analysis, that was, I'm glad that you took the time that you did to really talk about the ways that exploitation has happened, and what we all must do about it and take responsibility for, and also the ceremony. the ceremony, I had explored in breaks, taking walks on the land every day that I was there, but for the last day to have had the ceremony, and to have had the invisible men always providing the food and bringing it to us and are never seeing them, there was something so relieving and magical about it, and also holding the men with the respect that you did, because there are times when I just get so irritated at them. I'm not quite as kind and loving and genuine as you were. And so in that way, it was a space where everyone felt welcomed. And I just want to say I did speak to some of the people that you're on your team about development and kind of how to be helpful to you, because it's very clear that you hustled, that you were graced. It was obviously a spiritual call for you to find the land and to negotiate it as you did, and to fix it up in a very, very short period of time. So I just want to make a deep bow to you, Sherri, really, for the effort, the receiving of call, and the womanifesting. I don't like to say manifesting, the womanifesting of the dream and of the call, and that great things will portend as you continue to build out your team. And I just want to say I've worked with actually, when I got back, I probably put 10% of my time into working with Native communities, and have for 45 years or so, because my dad, I think I mentioned to you, was someone who's a lawyer, and he worked with the Shinnecock returning land to them when I was very, very young, and was part of a ceremony and have the drumbeat in me. And it's been repeated in several other ceremonies.
Oops, I think we lost Tracy for a minute. Until she comes back, Sherri, would you like to say something about the invisible men? You need to unmute. There you go.
Just to tell people what that means. So as I was preparing for the gathering, and going through all my processes and trying to figure out all of the logistics, my partner Tim asked me, well, how can I support you in this work? What is it that I can do to help support you? And I said, well, do you want to, and I kind of said it half joking, I said, do you want to work with a group of volunteer men to prepare all of the food for the gathering and make sure that everybody's in a good place, that their energy is good when they're preparing the food, so they're giving us food that's filled with love? And would you mind not being seen, being completely invisible, because this is a place where we want the women to feel safe being here, and we don't want you guys being a distraction. And so he took that on with relish. And so we had this small group of men who are all partners or spouses of the women that were here. And they cooked this extraordinary food for us the whole time that we were gathered. They made sure that the coffee and tea was ready for us. They filled up the water containers. When we were going to do ceremony, they went ahead of us and up into the field, and they prepared the fire for the ceremony. And all of the time, just really being completely unobtrusive and not needing to be seen, and not needing to get pats on the back. And so the beautiful thing about this is that the following weekend, the men gathered, and some of the women cooked for them. Me and a few of the other women cooked for them. And I jokingly said, well, we could be the invisible women. And my partner's like, absolutely not. We are not doing that. Women have been invisible in the kitchen for far too long. It was appropriate for the men to be invisible, but we want you to be honored for the work that you're doing, and for the help and the support that you constantly are giving us. And so I loved that Tracy mentioned the invisible men, because it's such a beautiful reflection of the space that we were in, and what was being created in that space. And so, yeah, that's the story of the invisible men.
Thanks, Sherri.
And I do apologize. I had I'm staying at a friend's house, and an animal kicked out the battery. If I can take just 1 or 2 minutes. I don't know if we have time or not.
Yes, please. Please complete, Tracy.
Yeah. So when I came back, I was just so full. First of all, where I went after 3 lovely days, really, with my matriarchal academics and friends, as they've become friends now. We had just a great time living in a house together while we went to the conference with you. And it was very, always always important for us to come together as we are in our sisterhood also. And what happened was that I went on to, there was a back-to-back conference 2 days later in Budapest with a group of lesbian leaders globally. And to me, it made perfect sense that I would go back to these conferences because, my background is in structural anthropology and mythology, and I'm always creating and looking for communities that are out of the ordinary. I'll just say it that way, out of the ordinary, but really trying to create, we either work within the existing structures or we create new ones. And I've spent decades in the San Francisco Bay Area creating women's buildings and centers and alternative spaces for many, many people, including women with wealth, to try to give them community as well. And so when I came back, it was just very moving because I had just been to your conference and also this lesbian conference for 3 days. And I basically said to people, look, if you really want to feel positive about the future, turn it over to the indigenous matriarchs and the lesbians. I am a lesbian, but it was like so moving. There was nothing spiritual about their conference whatsoever. There were 70 groups from Europe and Central Asia who were grossly underfunded. None of them had budgets over $3,000, and that was government funding, but they were really on fire and were doing some just profoundly important things, as you are as well. And I just kept thinking, oh, I wish these two leaders and conferences could merge because they would learn so much, for and with each other. And maybe one day that will happen. So when I came back, I had been invited I review about 2 projects a week and have done that for 45 years and usually spend 3 to 5 hours on them and at their locations. And one of them was Heron Shadow, which you may know, Sherri, through Cultural Conservancy. If you don't, I want to get your email and hook you up because they have a proposal and funding. They have a $5 million dream that's actually written out. And I think that you could, I said to your development person that I would get you documents to have you see how they've projected their future. It might be really helpful to you. And, I've done a lot of work with Nature Conservancy. They only have 7.6 acres, but it's for indigenous people, and they have already done some just remarkable things in a short 2-year period of having the land, in which they've planted it and done all kinds of things. They had to raise $1 million to get the land. And which is, brings me to this point. There are some resources happening. There is a movement. It's very slow, but within the Women Donors Network, which I helped to found, there is, there is an initiative called Reclaiming Stolen Lands, which is a group of women donors who are interested in helping people to get money to reclaim stolen lands. And there's a list of resources which I will make available to everyone here. I've worked with Nature Conservancy, Native Conservancy up in Alaska, which is also about reclaiming land, Indigenous Energy Initiatives, which Sherri, if you don't know, Sherri Smith, who just, the two of you would be an amazing set of leaders talking to each other about, what you're creating. So I am committed as a partner in bringing more donors who are quite resistant. Less than 1% of all philanthropy goes to indigenous people, and less in California, less than 2% of all the land, which we know worldwide, 86% of all land was stewarded by Native and indigenous people. And I think that figure now is under 17% worldwide. And it's just shameful. It's a shameful history. I think people have to feel and know the stories, because Black Lives Matter has really, I think, helped people to be more open-hearted about hearing the harshness of the stories and what they've made. We can no longer not act as though and not feel the pain of these stories. We don't need to be protected from the pain of these stories. We need to deal with the fact that while it may not have been us exactly perpetrating it, it was our people. And we have to now, there's a powerful piece.
It's like Tracy is frozen once again. And hopefully she'll be back in a minute. What she's sharing here is quite deep. I'm not surprised that she kind of knocked out the electricity and the internet on her side, because it's such a profound and an honest, heartfelt recognition of a privilege of colonial expression. So if she does come back, we will again let her complete. But let me check in with Angela M. to see if before you leave, I know that you're busy and that you're listening, if you would like to offer anything just of your experience. Now, let me just preface this by saying there were 5 of us from the International Feminists for the Gift Economy Network, actually 6. Let's see. I think there were 6 of us because Celine was there. So 4 of us together and Celine. So that was 5 of us. And anyways, it was Genevieve, Angela Miles, me, Tracy Gary, and Mary Ann Beeler. And then Celine was actually in Maine herself, staying with a friend. So Angela, if you'd like to offer any words, I know you're very busy getting things together too.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, this was really, really wonderful. This was huge and so important. I guess sort of Tracy's given some of her background and so on. I'll talk a bit about wow, that disorients me, being so big. I'm looking at myself so big and I'm not used to it, and it's quite depressing actually. Can I get reduced somehow? So thank you. Whew, what a relief. Anyway, I think some of the kind of thing that Tracy was talking about rivers or streams coming together, and I'm sure I'm so sorry I didn't hear Jen and Sherri, but the basic humanity, the giving people we all are, given half a chance, and what's kept us alive and surviving through these centuries of patriarchy and colonialism and class oppression and exploitation, right now neoliberal capitalism, that we need to be moving toward. We are moving toward the necessity of it as women right now is so obvious, if it wasn't obvious before, and to be in the, to see and be a part of and be invited to this, what Sherri and her community and others are doing, was like huge, huge, huge for me. And exciting. And just in terms of background, I think it's interesting to see, you know, what different ones of us are bringing and so on. I started out, I got politically involved, first of all, in England, working for the Labour Party. The first time it won an election right after the Second World War. The Labour Party came in after the Second World War and all the death and destruction, and set up healthcare, social services, everything like that, and then never got elected again until into the 60s. And I was a young thing, and I was really wanting to get that new government and get back to a world about what people needed. And I learned very quickly, because we won the election, that, you know what, it's not the political parties. It's not going to happen that way. Not that it isn't important who gets elected, but we need to be building and we need to be involved. And I got involved in lots of things, supporting women strikers in the clothing industry and putting out a newsletter and so on. And it was all learning, learning, learning. And I didn't at that time realize I was a woman, actually. I was very positive about feminism, unlike a lot of my colleagues on the left. I thought it was important. I thought this is a volcano. This is huge. This is going into private life. And this is good, but I don't need it because here I am. I'm active politically. Nobody stopped me. Nobody's got their foot on my neck. And then I realized I was a woman when I heard about and learned, because I think very much with ideas about the fact that the whole of our survival, our economy, our work is based on women, peasants, the non-waged. It's structured. And then I began to see that this whole thing is patriarchal. It's not just a class divided society, and it's not just racist and colonialist. It is patriarchal, and it is so deep. And then my feminism always was what I call an integrative feminism, which is, and they're across a lot of the tendencies of feminism, all the tendencies of feminism, actually, except perhaps liberal feminism. There are feminists who do see that women's struggle is a struggle for humanity. It's everybody's struggle. It's not being equal with men in a system like we have. It's like changing what the definition of the real human being is, because it's a male definition and it's really, really, pathetic. And it's not just a question of androgyny. We're all halves. We need to bring our male and female sides together. It's that we need to be the human side, which has been the oppressed side, and it has been the women's side. We need to be women humans together. And so that's, and the structure against the struggle against gender was always very, very central in terms of an enforced dichotomy, exclusive dichotomy of ruler and ruled. The non-carer, and all that was not caring was defined as the superior, and that was the male, and that was the human. I mean, and so these integrative feminisms, doesn't matter, Black feminism, lesbian feminism, socialist feminism, all those radical feminism, there were all integrative tendencies in those in all those categories. Those were not just political descriptions, those were self-descriptions, who we wanted to be known as. I always just called myself a feminist because I wanted people to figure out my politics talking to me, not deciding on some kind of artificial definitions of what is a socialist feminist, what is a radical feminist, or whatever. I think perhaps the eco-feminists were the group that had maybe didn't have any that were just about equality. The socialist feminists defined what was equality differently than the liberal feminists or the radical feminists and so on. But there were always those two who want transformation led by or shaped by, informed by women's priorities, and feminism is the movement, and the most important tendency of feminism is the movement that really does do that. And I found it all over. I did researching for my PhD. I went traveling around and interviewing feminists and looking at them. And I found that politics everywhere among feminists, oftentimes perceived as separatist and essentialist and biologically essentialist. And there were some of those elements, some of those tendencies. And for years now, with neoliberalism and with the spread of the kind of market that leaves nothing outside it, either destroys it or pushes it onto women's backs to do for free, or takes it over and monetizes it and makes it scarce and excludes people. This stage of capitalism, capitalist patriarchy, has taken over the UN. It's taken over the spaces where were spaces for change. And I've felt for decades and decades and decades that we needed women in all the many places in this world, in all the many communities and connections, needed to find a powerful place and voice for defining this politics. And it wasn't going to happen. We needed to get the spaces that were really autonomous. That is not government provided, although hopefully influencing and connected to government. And it's been really obvious to me that Indigenous women grounded in communities with this knowledge and with this, which are not gendered. Are not built on an enforced, dichotomous, hierarchical set of relationships, and know that, and are active everywhere on this land under most super pressure, as all of the lands and the spaces become commodified and financialized and all that. I've been thinking that to do this, we have to be able to come together so clearly with you might call it matriarchal, with the power of women as it has been historically and as it has to be, that we need the leadership of Indigenous women, and it can't be an obligation, and it's nothing that should be placed upon Indigenous women, but we have to be able to enable that. We have to be there, not just to be followers, to be part together with doing that. And I it's difficult. I mean, even to envisage or to think of a grounded, human, earth-based, humble, if you want to say, or just do the work and find each other. And I was really, really impressed and really excited at the fact that Sherri, doing this work so grounded in that culture and the history, would start with an invitation, or not start, but include early on that sense of a broad participation and a broad influence, and presume to that's powerful, that's courageous. It's truly, it's fantastic. It was fantastic for me to see what she's doing and to think, because, it's not dead obvious that at this stage, that would be so part of the project. And gift economy and that theorizing is the dialectical, materialist, historical. It provides a basis. It provides, it's not that the theory makes it happen, but to understand it and to see it and to see a basis. It isn't just women who we are as we're embodied. It's gift, and that's where women are at. And it's not essentialist. It's not biological. It's historical. It is materialist, and it's visionary, but it's so grounded in the history and the matriarchal history and in the still existing Indigenous cultures and communities. And I can see with the Idle No More movement in Canada. I don't know if you know about that. That was really, really important. And women were very, very important, that clearly central. And there was a lot of acknowledgement of that. Some of it just words but also true. And that's been in the incredible moment here in Canada where so many First Nations in the residential schools that were enforced and kids were drawn away into residential schools from their home communities for a long, long period, recently discovered graves there. Many of them children from those homes, not all, and unidentified, unrecognized. That process of discovering those is going on in Canada now and has really, really opened the way and opened the hearts and the minds to face some of that history. And the process is, it's very much about lives. It's very much about grieving. It is not a male defined. It is not a classic front line of push for change. And that to me is very interesting. So and I don't know, I presume that people have talked about gift economy and so on, but
Yes.
Yes. I get a big vigorous nod from Letecia there. So I just want to say that to me, it's hugely important and really exciting. And we cannot, the only group I think that can call together or bring forward a major international, locally and globally, international process that could have women's voice, the only ones that could do it clearly, that in a way that would make it very clear and would attract those who want deep change. It wouldn't be confusing. Whatever message any feminists or any women put out to say, let the women come together to have our voices heard, would not be clear. The deep transformative framework would not be clear and secure if it was not Indigenous women that did it. If then who's drawn together is drawn together with a different framework and a clearly transformative one and a gift one in a way. So that's, you can't just wait. You can't just say, oh, let's help, let's have the Indigenous women lead, let's sit down. No, but what can be done to support that and to do that, and how can it happen, and where are the openings and
Beautiful.
So thank you.
Thank you, Angela, for those beautiful words. And definitely, yes, I think it's, I'm just going to say it out loud. Indigenous women have always had a voice in their communities around the world. It is only because of the oppression and the suppression of the colonial Western way that women have not been listened to. And so now I think we're at a time that all the local Indigenous women are now being listened to by the world.
Can I?
Okay. So what I'd like to do is to bring Tracy back, because Tracy said she had to leave around 15 minutes after the hour to let her close what she needed to do. And then, yes. So Tracy.
Can I say one sentence, because I don't think I can come back.
Okay.
I just want to say, I don't think that's easy for Indigenous women to do. I'm not the one to speak about that, but to do that and to be there in their communities, they need support and they need it to be really informed. So it isn't just,
exactly
worse than nothing. So
yes,
it's not easy.
Exactly.
Easy.
Yes.
It's not easy, with the patriarchy that has been brought into all those communities and
exactly
with the outside world. Okay, just so it's clear.
Yes. Yes. No one ever assumes that it's easy.
No,
I
no,
just wanted to acknowledge that they have been speaking
oh,
since they're,
absolutely.
yes,
Yeah,
absolutely.
I just
So,
want to say that's partly
yeah.
what was so impressive to me, that, you know, it's a tough road.
Beautiful. Thank you, Angela. Tracy.
Angela, I'm very glad to have gotten to see you, and I'm so sorry my network connections has not been better. I'll just say finally, Sherri, what I was really saying was that to see you surrender to belonging and feeling connected to us, and not only needing to sort of, what some leaders do, is sort of to push a story or a vision of what's ahead. And I just want to really thank you for modeling that, because it made us all much more, I think, open-hearted to co-creating the future with you, albeit that it is you are the receiver with your community of that vision. So it was lovely to be with you all today. I'm taking one of my godchildren to a land-based event, and the time changed. So I will listen while in the car. Take care of yourselves. Thank you so much for Letecia, as always, and Jen for making these things happen. And may we go forth with clear creativity. And I think there are 30 or 40 people that are also listening, and there will be hundreds that listen to the tape or watch it. And I just think, let's reaffirm our commitment to being not only helpful, but understanding that the solution is actually in the matriarchal framework and with the Indigenous women in co-leadership in every way. And for us to be with them, beside them, and behind them in giving our resources and giving our care and love. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Tracy. Safe travels. Angela, you too, safe travels. Okay, well, it comes to me. I'm going to just give a few minutes of my experience so that we have time to actually address the questions and comments that have come in. What I'd like to say is that, the context for my comments have to do with, of course, always the background. And the background is my father was born into a time when the Philippines had been colonized by the United States, and then came to this country during segregation. So the core values of the culture from the Philippines, my father's side and my mother's side, were taught within the home. And what I want to say about the gathering was this. I've also helped organize hundreds of workshops and conferences and gatherings. And it was delightful, first of all, to be able to meet in person people that I hadn't met before in our network. So and we had been meeting online for so long, since, of course, 2020, April of 2020, when we had our first online gathering for the network, to be able to see the women in person. And then in the house that we stayed, there were 4 of us. It was a 4-bedroom house. I was the youngest gray-haired woman. So when we arrived on the land, often in places that I go to by myself, I'm considered an elder, and I'm the youngest elder of our group. So then we had Celine, who was actually in our group. I would consider her the maiden, although she's in her 30s at least. But the attention, and Sherri, it was so graced. I've been in a lot of multicultural things, a lot of intercultural events, and the protocols were very subtle, but very adhered to. And so any woman who was an elder woman, you never had to worry about your needs. There was always someone there attending to make sure that you had a seat, if you looked confused, to help you if you needed it, whatever it was your needs were. I really want to point out this highlight because this was so special. While there were porta-janes, they were very clean. And the water that you washed your hands with was warm water. It was not cold water every day. The invisible men made sure that we had warm water to wash our hands. That's how they cared for us. That's just a little tiny example. The flow, I'm just going to talk about the flow of the day. The whole process was very lovely. It was very engaging. There was plenty of left brain information, and it was delivered in a way that was quite open-hearted. There was a flow. It was beautiful, Sherri, to be able to meet your family, to meet your mother and your sister and your nieces and nephews, your nieces. And that was just beautiful to see you in the context. What I do recognize is that it is hard for people who are non-Indigenous to really understand the connection to the land, and that there are certain protocols with the land when you come to it. You don't take from the land rocks, leaves, flowers, pieces of wood without actually asking the stewards of the land if it's appropriate. These are things. And then in the beginning, it's also very awkward to have to say a lot of protocols. So there was a beautiful balance of that very open-heartedness. There was an ease of the flow that happened. I loved seeing the generations, the different generations, and how there were contributions. Sherri made sure that there were open mic opportunities on the 2 days that we were together full, where women could actually present either their own spoken words or sing a song. Jen actually sang a song, and among other things. So that part was very delightful. I think, to me, what of all that, I've gone to many dominantly women's gatherings. I'm trained as a radical separatist feminist witch. So that means something. And it means that in my training, what we were attempting to do was to radically shift the consciousness of women who came to our gatherings so that they could actually see, feel, and sense that everything that was done in the world could be done by women, which was why we had no male pronouns, no male icons, no male voices, no music was played that wasn't played by women. And we only heard women's voices. And there's something that happens to the consciousness of women that's very subtle when women gather together and all you hear and see and feel are women doing everything. The invisible men reminded me of the way in which the egalitarian expression of the Filipino culture also is. Men would not come into a woman's gathering, but they would cook, they would set up, they would make sure things got done. And that is what it means to be in a world where women actually have our own spaces. There was intellectual rigor, very interesting conversations, women who traveled and did work in Africa, women who were healers, many little synchronicities, like Jen and I got onto I have to brag about these souped up golf carts. Those were so awesome. I mean, they were, so every time you turned around and you looked like you wanted to go someplace, somebody would say, do you need a ride? And when we drove up in our car, we got onto the golf cart and there was one seat left. I wanted to make sure that in the very beginning that we all got on the same golf cart before we dispersed. There was one seat left, and the woman who got on with Jen and I and the other women was from Austin, Texas. So it was such a synchronicity. Anyways, it was very, very beautiful. Then when we haven't actually even mentioned that there were hurricane conditions the night before we started, which meant that at the Arbor, where our outside venue had been blown out by the hurricane. So it was almost as if we had to, Tracy was mentioning that the challenge that she had coming to this event. And there were different things that happened. but it was almost as if nature was setting something up for us as a trial to make sure that we could get there and be grounded. So when we started, the women, everyone in the room was so happy to be in that room. And that open-heartedness, that groundedness, the attention to the detail was something that I can honestly say has not been present in women's groups, large women's groups that I've been in, because it doesn't have the same, it hasn't happened in the same way. You know, when you come to Sherri's land, that is her home, quite literally. She lives on that land, but not only that, she's indigenous to that land. So you enter into the space where she is welcoming you into her home with the graciousness, and that's why I mentioned her mother was there, and we got to meet her and hear stories from people. I think the most inspiring things that happened were when Jen was speaking about the maternal gift economy, I would look around the room and women were just excited and they were thrilled. They were curious. They weren't sure, but they knew something was right about what she was saying, even if they didn't quite understand it. And then in between times when we got to speak to the women in our private conversations, I got to meet women who were exploring their own experiments, that they now had the language to be able to call it the gift economy, the maternal gift economy. And I felt that I could feel and see the importance of all of us who choose to speak about the maternal gift economy. What happens when we actually drop that into the bucket? It gives people language. Now, it changes the way that people think, because now they have a different way of viewing. With Sherri being there, with Sherri's speaking from the indigenous point of view, and I will add that it, you know, the tacit knowledge, the tacit knowing, which is a culture that's embedded inside of you that doesn't need words. So in order for you to be able to have tacit knowledge, you need to have a shared history and a shared understanding. So the tacit knowledge that I have inside of me when I was growing up, I just assumed that everybody knew the maternal gift economy. I didn't need to have words for it. It's just the way that humans are. And more importantly, it's the way that we are with each other, specifically as women. And it's the way that we need to be in order to create community and peace. In meeting Jen and actually seeing the way that her words begin to filter into the consciousness of the women around, I could see how important it is, the gift in the heart of language, why it's really important. Sherri inspired us to always speak from the heart, but it just needs to filter down, up and down with this openness. So the protocol at the ceremony was very subtly attended to, and it was, I think, for people outside of a culture that doesn't have those, that has a different cosmology. It's an entirely different way of being in the world itself. And when you're on the land that you were birthed on for thousands, you know, millennium, for maybe hundreds of thousands of years, there's a different way that you have in relationship to that, and a responsibility to that land, and the way in which the ancestors would recognize that. Many of us are transplants, and we don't know those stories anymore. And we also don't think it's important because it isn't important to us. But those of us who live on the land, those people, these are protocols, because every piece that's on that land is related to an ancestor, is an ancestor. It's a living being. And that's a consciousness that needs to shift. It's very different than the Western culture, where there's this real separation of object and subject. It's all subject. It's all relational. So it was, I was very hopeful. It gave me lots of insight. I have to say, traveling, I was still, in my masks and everything. So it was, a lot of women had not been together in large gatherings, and there was plenty of spaciousness. So Sherri, thank you so much, and kudos to you for actually doing it. And I really look forward to next year and supporting the work as it goes forward. So with that, we have about 30 minutes for, I don't know if what has come up, Sherri, that you might have things that you'd want to share now.
Yeah, I mean, there's so many stories that we could tell. I want to just tell a story about my grandmother. When I was thinking, when you were talking about how you grew up with the gift, and my grandmother, who was grew up in the Passamaquoddy community at Zibayik. So all of my grandmothers are Passamaquoddy and my grandfather's a Penobscot, except for one Scottish woman that one of my grandfathers found on the ice and decided that she was the one. And she was the spirit of the gift. Everybody talked about her generosity and her care, the way that she cared for people. So when my grandmother passed, there were dozens of people who were there, who were in my parents' generation, who talked about my grandmother making sure that they had winter boots, making sure that they all had hats and gloves and winter coats, making sure that they all had food. And I remember being really small and having her wake me up at like 4 o'clock in the morning, and in the middle of the winter time, and bundling me all up in my winter clothes. And I had one of those jackets that had the fur around the face, and it had the string ties. And I remember her pulling that string tie really tight and talking to me, and she's got my little face right in front of her face and telling me what she wanted me to do. And she would give me this bag of stuff. And she'd say, I want you to go to this person's house, and I want you to hang this on their door, and don't make any noise. Don't let anybody hear you. And she'd give me a branch from an evergreen tree. So sometimes it'd be a pine branch or spruce or something. And I'd have to sweep my footsteps when I left, and walk around all of this different ways and keep sweeping my footsteps so that nobody could figure out who it was that came there and left those things on the door. And I remember asking my grandmother one time, I said, why don't we just give those things to these people? And she said, well, because I don't want them to be embarrassed when they see me. And so she, not only was she generous and was she gifting to people, but she also really wanted to preserve their dignity. She wanted them to feel cared for, but in a dignified way. And I think that one of the things that we can learn about a true gifting economy or a gifting way of being, we talk about our sacred way of life being Skidgenawe Bamasawagan. And so this gifting way of being, not as an economy, but as a way of life, that it can be done in a way that's not proud, and that's not needing recognition, that's not about affirmation of your own value. Because then it kind of ties it into, I think, into this pay to play scenario that's been established of lifting people up who have the most. And I think that sometimes people like to brag about having the most to give. And so, that quiet, dignified way that my grandmother would support people, to me, really was the essence of what it is that gifting is all about. It's about really holding people up so that they can stand in a way that preserves their dignity, but ensures their sense of safety and a sense of belonging. and allow some ease for whatever that they're born with, their gift, to rise up within them and then be shared with the world in a way that wouldn't be possible if they were constantly worrying about their well-being and getting their basic needs met. And so to me, the gift is really gifting back to all of us. It's not an exchange. It's the form of reciprocal sharing that's a constant state of giving, with the understanding that what you give comes back to you in some way. It doesn't necessarily come back to you as an exchange from the person that you're gifting to, but that, you know, by gifting to someone and helping to lift them up, you're making it possible for whatever gift they carry to be shared with the world, which then gifts us all in some ways. And so, yeah, I'm just really thankful for my grandparents and thankful for the representation that they shared with me, for the influence that they had over me in my life, and how they were such caring and quietly giving people. They didn't want anybody to know about the ways that they helped support others. Even when my grandmother passed, you know, she was just such a humble woman. Her and my grandfather lived in the same little tiny 2-bedroom house that they had raised their 14 kids in. And we found in her drawer a stack of $100 bills. I was like, I don't know, there was like 18 of them in there. And she said, this is for this loan that has to be paid off for this person, and they're not allowed to know. So please make sure that this keeps getting paid. And so she apparently took out a loan sometime and secretly gave somebody some money, and was making payments on it, you know, because she didn't have a lot of resources. And just that, seeing that was probably like, there was all kinds of her other things, right, that we were looking at, but seeing that, that's what got me. That's what really made me like break down and cry the hardest, because that was the essence of my grandmother, was that kindness and that thoughtfulness and that giving. And so, yeah, I wanted to bring her beautiful spirit into this conversation.
Thank you, Sherri. Well, I see that there have been quite a few questions and comments. Liliana, can you maybe select one and present it? And okay.
Yes, there's a question from Ciola Bromley, and she says, is given a transfer more than an exchange? This is to all the panelists.
Jen, would you like to? You were on the edge of your seat and then you sat back. You need to unmute. There you go.
Yeah, that's what a gift is, that a gift is given to satisfy a need and without an expectation of an exchange. That's based on the maternal model, where mothers have to give to the children unilaterally because children can't get back an exchange. And if they the children learn from that model in the first years of their lives. Nobody's doing quid pro quo. Nobody's saying, the mother doesn't say, I'll feed you if you feed me back, or I'll feed you if you give me $1. You know, that it's not, it's mainly unilateral. I know that it's sometimes mothers also say, you know, if you do this, I'll give you a cookie, or if you do that, you can't do that because I'll punish you. But there is a basic interaction of giving unilaterally. The child receives it and understands what unilateral giving is, if nothing else, from the mirror neurons that the child has that repeat the experience of the mother and the vice versa. So they also have this intuition of what each other is doing, and child has that model in front of her and can repeat it. And I believe that that transfer, if you want to call it that, is the basis of our interactions in general, and that the exchange interaction is a kind of parasite on that. And it alters it and it turns us in a different direction. So that's my explanation. That's the answer to your question as far as I know.
Thanks, Jen. Sherri, did you have any words that you might want to offer to that?
Well, I feel like the words I offered about my grandmother really kind of answered that, that she was never looking for anything in return. She was just, as Jen said, she was a loving mother, a loving grandmother, and operating from within that space of being a loving matriarch. She was making sure that all of the children in the community were taken care of. She was making sure that whatever privilege she had, she was using her agency in whatever form that was, as a this very humble, young, like Native woman who had only an 8th grade education, who raised 14 kids and worked sometimes 2 or 3 jobs to make sure that they, that she and my grandfather, to make sure that they were all fed and cared for, that they had clothes, and that they were, having the opportunity to advance in life in ways that they'd never had the opportunity, or she had never had the opportunity for. And so, it's just about that loving care. It's about being in a space of really reclaiming our humanity, reclaiming the essence of what it was that allowed our humanoid species to continue to exist. There were 9 humanoid species that they've identified thus far who, did not survive because they lived in isolation. Ours survived because we learned how to care for one another. We learned how to cooperate and collaborate and live in communities of care with one another. And it's that essence of our humanity that is being brought forth in the maternal gifting economy, because, mothering is an activity that's engaged in by a lot of people. And so, it's not gender specific, right? There are fathers who raise their children as a single parent, and they certainly do a lot of what we would consider mothering, that nurturing and support and loving, compassionate care that is often associated with the mother can be offered by anyone and in any essence within the society. And I think it's that we've, part of colonization is that we've learned to be dependent on this governmental paternalistic being that doesn't exist. This imaginary paternalistic being under the colonial governments. And so we look to them to solve all of our problems. We look to them to, something's going wrong in our countries of origin, right? And we're like, why aren't they taking care of this? Why aren't they fixing this? We see people who are homeless. Why aren't they doing something about this? Or people that are hungry, why aren't they feeding them? We've forgotten how to care for one another because we've set all of our expectations. We've given away our autonomy. We've given away our power to this imaginary paternal figure that has been established under the dependency requirement of colonization. And so, part of this process of decolonizing is recognizing all the ways that we have had our own truths distorted and how we've been separated from one another in all of these illusions of separation that are necessitated for divide and conquer. That was part of that colonial capitalist patriarchal paradigm that we're trying to move away from. And so, thinking about it in larger terms and really trying to shift our mindset away from economic definitions for everything. When I talk about this in my classes, one of the things I say is that we can't even think about ourselves without thinking about ourselves in economic models about how we're saleable, right, or marketable. But even when somebody's single, they say, oh, they're on the market. And so, we've capitalized even our most personal relationships. And so I think that, one of the things that we need to really think about doing is learning how we change our own minds because we can think of everything as an exchange. We can think of everything as a commodity. We can think of everything as saleable and marketable, or we can begin to recognize the sacredness of our lives in relationship with one another. And that's an internal mindset that has to happen for the individual, that will then eventually spill out and begin changing systems and societies. So.
Thank you, Sherri. Juliana, do you see?
Yes, I have a question from Marta Benavides. Buenos días. Do we have an analysis of what is going on today and what we see for the immediate and longer range future on terms of this new multipolar world order and how it impacts the economies, particularly the gift economy, and ways to proceed with the vision of end of century and start the next century? Thank you. Marta Benavides.
Okay, Jen, that's kind of a big story.
Yeah, it's a huge question.
Yeah.
Well, maybe just commenting on what Sherri was just saying at the end. I think this idea that we all interpret everything as ourselves as saleable, we think of everything as having a price and all of that. That's the neoliberalism. That's the neoliberal idea that has just infested the world now. And we've gotten into a mentality that's even worse than it used to be. And this is happening today. And at the same time, we have the whole environmental disaster happening around us. So in a way, maybe we're clinging to the market ideas in order to not look at what we're experiencing and what we have created through the market. So we really need an awakening of consciousness and conscience before we can change this. I mean, we have to change this mentality of neoliberalism and access the gift economy within ourselves. Choose this gift economy instead. This is us. The whole neoliberal thing is not us, not human. We've created an inhuman thing. And that's what's destroying us. So, and in the multipolar world order, what we have is this patriarchal domination game going on through threat of nuclear war. I mean, we are going insane. Our governments are insane because they don't know how to change things, and the environment is crashing. So everybody has to have an access to the actual human, which is based in the maternal and the gift economy. So that's, maybe somebody else can.
Thanks, Jen. I see Tracy's hand is up. Tracy?
Thank you. I'm not actually going to do video because I am driving. You'd be happy to know, but this is such a powerful question that you've asked, which is really, Jen has, for 40 years or more has really developed this whole new economy, or named, an exchange that has been going on forever. That is really the gift economy, and the way that we can be happier. You don't have to have money to be part of the gift economy. You have to have that willingness and interest in, really, as Sherri has said, in the interest of the whole, and not just be ego-centered. And so what's powerful is if we think, there are those that believe that the environment will determine really whether we as humans continue to live the planet
will probably go on for quite a while. But, 2030, 2050, we can see the deterioration and the things that are happening. So I hope that we will have really women, and there are lots and lots of men who are also beginning to kind of look at the gift economy as something that, has enormous value, but we haven't figured out sort of the full economics of it. How do you abandon needing to make a living to, thinking of yourself as a person who serves the sake of the whole? And so I think it'd be fantastic if we had a strategic visioning, larger conference to really talk about, here's the world that we want to create. Now, there have been many other people that have done parts of this, but to have what does the end of the century and the beginning of the next century, what does that look like under the gift economy or the matriarchal led cultures, and choose this practice. For some people say I'm a Buddhist or I'm a practicing XYZ, and I think if more of us say I practice the gift economy as the way of changing humanity, there's just a very powerful call to action that I think we could have, and it's going to take some planning and some convening, because there are a lot of academics and people who are part of the gift economy that Jen has brought together over many decades. And just imagine that we, took a year to input people's brilliant ideas for a call to action, and also what does 2050 and 2075 and the year 3000 look like under these new economies? So I hope we get there with you.
Thanks, Tracy. Sherri, would you like to add something to that?
Yes. One of the things, there are so many things, but I'll stick to one in the interest of time. One of the things that I love, and I talked about this a little bit, I think at the gathering, is that, our ideas of what change means and how change is achieved are changing, they're shifting, they're transforming away from moving within the current systems and trying to change or take down those systems into the creation of the world that we actively want to inhabit. And so I came across this quote, and it's a relatively new quote in this book that somebody sent me. I have no idea who, but it arrived in the mail one day, and I've been enjoying it. But there's a quote in here by Angela Davis, and it says, "I think our notions of what counts as radical have changed over time. Self-care and healing and attention to the body and the spiritual dimension. All of this is now part of radical social justice struggles. That wasn't the case before. And I think that now we're thinking deeply about the connection between interior life and what happens in the social world." And so there's this understanding that we are co-creating the reality that we're living in. And then the question is always, why are we collectively co-creating a world that none of us would choose individually? And so for ourselves or for our children. And so when we're looking to the next century, one of the exercises that I like to take people through is imagine the world you want to inhabit. Imagine what it looks like, what it feels like, how you experience it. How do you show up in that space? How do you become a citizen of the world you want to inhabit? And then begin living that way today. How do you begin today to become a citizen of the world that you most want to inhabit? And that's what I see Angela Davis talking about, is like, we have to actually work to become what we hope to receive in the future. We have to become the citizens of the world that we want to inhabit. Otherwise, this imagined world will never be inhabited by living beings. It will stay in that imaginary realm, right? And so we have to actively become and then walk toward that future by behaving as though we're the people living in that future as it exists now. And we still have to stop the harm that's being imposed upon us by the current system. But we need to, I write about that in Sacred Instructions. That needs to be a small portion of our work. 10% looking around, seeing what the harm is that's coming toward us, 10% actively working to obstruct and to stop that harm, and then another 80% of our energy in actually visioning the world that we want to inhabit and purposefully becoming a citizen who can and is capable of inhabiting the world that we most want to live in.
I like that. I like that equation and that idea. I'm looking at the time here, and unfortunately, we only have about 7 minutes left. And Jen, I didn't know if you wanted to say some closing words. I'd like us to all be able to have some closing words, if you'd like.
Well, I've been looking on my desktop to try to find a paragraph that I took from the program of a conference that I'm going to next week, which is going to be done mainly by Kurdish women in Germany, and I couldn't find it, but what it says is something about how we have to change the thought forms that are the patriarchal or male thought forms that our academics have imposed on us for so many centuries. And we have to liberate the mind, basically. And that I believe in that. And what we have to put in instead is the gift economy. We have to remake all of academia on the basis of the gift economy. And that I think that would allow the gift economy in practice to thrive and to emerge much more easily.
Thank you, Jen. I think it's important. I know in our group, the gift economy means women at the center, but that is the key element there when we're talking about the gift economy, is because there are many people who speak about the gift economy, but women and children are not at the center. And when I say children, I mean male and female, and we are all children of someone. So that means that we're all included in what I'm saying here. Okay. Sherri, did you have some closing words you want to offer us?
Yeah, I want to thank everybody for participating in this, and hopefully we'll have more time again together. I always love coming to these salons. And I want to answer Jan's question in the Q&A, who asked about gender identities within our traditional territory, and to say kia ora to Jan, who's coming to us from Auckland. And for us, we have male spirit born into a male body, female spirit born into a female body, male spirit born into a female body, female spirit born into male body, and then a true two spirit. And so true two spirit is someone who has both a full masculine and full feminine spirit inhabiting the same body. And those are sacred beings within our traditional territorial ways of knowing. And so we recognize all of those different gendered identities because we look beyond the physicality to the spirit of the person who's inhabiting the body. I think that one of the most important conversations that is being had today is this whole notion of gendered identity within a binary, and that as we start to break down the binaries within our thinking and start looking more toward spiritual and energetic ways of recognizing one another, what happens is that binary breakdown in our minds actually helps to expand our capacity for creative thinking and expand our ways of knowing and being in the world as well. And so I think that anything that we can do to break down the binaries within our mind is going to help us to imagine a world where there's more equity, there's more justice, there's more balance, there's more harmony. And so hopefully we can take that essence of what we're talking about, because part of the challenge that we've had in the world and the way that it's grown imbalanced is that there hasn't been a space for both masculine and feminine to operate within the same sphere. And the voice of the sacred feminine has been left out of the conversation, which has led to the imbalance that we're experiencing. And, you know, we don't want to continue imbalanced in the other direction. We want to bring in a sense of balanced way of being. And for us, that includes that sacred space in between, which we could talk about in a whole nother salon. But I just wanted to encourage people to think about that and to honor all of those who are coming in during this time to help us to expand our ways of seeing, knowing, and being. So thank you to Jen and to Letecia, Tracy and Angela, to Liliana and Diane for helping with this salon, for all of the other work that you continue to do in the world. You're a blessing and a gift to us all. Thank you.
Thank you, Sherri. Tracy, did you have any last words that you'd like to say? And if not, I want you to be driving safely, so we'll understand if you don't unmute.
Okay,
But
sorry,
my
godchild has just unmuted me. I just want to say thank you to all of us, and may we co-create that future for humanity together. Thank you.
Beautiful. Thank you, Tracy. Angela, any last words you'd like to offer to the group here? Unmute, please.
Thank you, and wonderful to be here. Yeah, I think the absolute refusal to the refusal to give up the idea of male and female, or masculine and feminine, and what those mean, it at the same time as resisting gender as an enforced dichotomization and hierarchization of what is a biological and spirit dualism that is not absolutely dichotomous. I mean, to be able to make a distinction between resisting gender as we would resist class or race as anything but social constructs, and that's another place and way in which indigenous cultures, which are non-hierarchical, are welcoming of all, and yet work with notions of age cohorts and male, female, and other kinds of structuring aspects of our humanity. We have to make a distinction between we can't think that resisting gender is meaning having no definition of we as human beings in our diverse ages and cohorts and male and female, and that kind of energy, those energies that are really important in who we are as human beings. That distinction, you know, gender equality, what does it mean? Like class equality? Or it suggests that gender is real and not a structure of hierarchy. So, and that's not my main thing. That's not all I want to, you know, discuss, but that was the last question. And to me, it's crucial that we can fight strongly as women for that energy, those responsibilities, those priorities to be defining priorities, and not be enforcing gender, refusing it. And that, you know, women fighting for humanity it's not a contradiction. Anyway, thank you. And, you know, let's make the change.
Great.
Let's do it.
Jen, I see that you have your hand up.
Yeah, I think that mothers are the bearers of the gift economy in our capitalist patriarchy, and that when men are mothers, that is when men do the gift economy, there's no question of gender will be defined differently. We don't have to, the question of the gift economy transverses the question of gender, but it's there. And so we need that, that is part of the mix of that particular conceptual knot. And we need to understand that better so as to understand gender better.
Thanks, Jen. I'm just going to say one thing about the gender thing from my cultural point of view. You know, the culture that I come from, in the region that I come from, what is highlighted is strength and beauty. It's not even gender or sexed. It has to do with the story being strength and beauty. And that is the cultivation of what we bring into the world, regardless of our sex or our gender. So I've listened to a lot of the gendered things, you know, and I just am present with it because it's a necessary conversation so that people can get their own experience of moving beyond that binary understanding. But I wanted to just say that not all cultures are fixated on this ideology. So then to go to the close, what I want to say is to thank everyone. And I apologize to anyone whose questions did not get answered in this forum. We will make sure that our speakers have a copy of the chat and the Q&A, and perhaps we can get back to you if it's a question that directly is addressed to them personally. And I would like to thank Jen and Genevieve Vaughan, Sherri Mitchell, Tracy Gary, Angela Miles. And Celine was to be with us today, but unfortunately she is not feeling well. So we miss you. And Mary Ann, I see you are here with us, and thank you for being here. We're waving at you. We miss you. Liliana, thank you for attending to the chat and the Q&A and for bringing forward what is important that we could with the time that we have. Of course, Diane, always for supporting us. And the International Feminists for the Gift Economy Network, and each of you for joining us here. And for those of you who'll be watching the recording, please join us in 2 weeks. We're very excited for our next Salon on November the 12th. Salon number 38. The question posed is the maternal gift economy essentialist? Now that'll be a good discussion with Genevieve Vaughan, Paula Milchiori, and Angela Miles. So we want to welcome you back. The recording of today's session will be posted on our website, the Maternal Gift Economy Movement.org. If you'd like to be notified and stay in touch with us for our upcoming salons and events, you can sign up for a mailing list on our website, or you can send questions directly to us at maternalgifteconomy@gmail.com. We'll see you in 2 weeks, everyone. Please be safe, be well, be kind to one another, and more importantly, if you're in the United States, vote. And the second thing, on a global level, please, please help us send the energy out. No nuclear war, that peace prevail on earth. And everyone, please take very, very good care. Bye for now. Enjoy your weekend.